Tim Seibles is a poet, professor, poet laureate of Virginia, author of 6 collections of poetry. His honors include an Open Voice Award and fellowships from the National Endowment for the Arts, Provincetown Fine Arts Work Center. And in 2012, he was nominated for the National Book Award for Fast Animal, which is on sale outside. And he's a professor of English at Old Dominion University in Virginia, and I'm very honored to have him here tonight. We met at the Dodge Poetry Festival a year ago in New Jersey, and I knew he had to come to Southern Maryland at that point, and I think you're going to enjoy it. So the American poet William Carlos Williams said, "It's difficult to get the news from poems, and yet we die miserably every day for lack of what is found there." So I was thinking about the news, and I found a headline, and here's the headline: "So many babies among dead in Texas church shooting." That's the headline. And here's what I found in one of Tim's poems. "I want to believe love can be big enough to beat back all the bad news. And today I don't think I do, but maybe I think too much. And a touch of lips is bigger than history. And where I am, this present tense is just a song that's really over by the time it begins." And in these lines, Tim reminds us of the power of poetry, the power of love. Love, if we believe it, can help bad news wash over us and give us hope. But it is hard when so much comes at us each day, like the mass shootings in the Texas church, and people were praying, and assault weapons and bump stocks and bigotry and racism and war and smaller stuff like just the other morning, I heard a young boy waiting at the school bus stop tell the girl next to him she's nothing but a bitch, and he was laughing when he said it. Maybe we do think too much when we doubt the power of love. And in these lines, Tim tells us a touch of lips, a kiss is bigger and stronger than all our generations of hatred. And more, that this present moment is just a song that's over by the time it begins. We have so little time, and yet we act as if we have forever. It is hard to get the headline news from poems, and that's a good thing, unless we read in tomorrow's Washington Post, in large print across the front page, it's all about love, really. But we know that's not going to happen. So I invite you to sit back, to relax, and enjoy being reminded of the news that is found in poems, Tim's poems, news of suffering and loss, of beauty and song, news of love and hope. Ladies and gentlemen, Tim Seibles.
Thanks, Neil. It's so nice to be here. You can hear me okay in the back? It's all right in the back? Okay. I think I understand that Lucille Clifton used to teach nearby, right? This is true. Anyway, so I'll recite one of my favorite poems in the world by her. I think I have it pretty well locked in my mind. It's called Hag Riding. I was lucky enough to see Lucille Clifton read several times. And if you've never seen her read, I'm sure you can see her online if you like, but there was nothing really quite comparable to standing in her presence. Hag Riding. Why is what I ask myself. Maybe it is the African in me, still trying to get home after all these years. But when I wake to the heat of morning, galloping down the highway of my life, something hopeful rises in me, rises and runs me out into the road. And I lob my fierce thigh high over the rump of the day. And honey, I ride, I ride. If you don't know Lucille Clifton's work, I recommend it. I can't recommend it more highly, actually, if you want to know something about the power of poetry. I'll start off, I'll read around. I'll move mostly between the last two books, and then I'll maybe read a few things that are really new, too new to be in any book. And then I understand there'll be a little time for Q&A, and if you're interested in books, I understand they're out there, and I would gladly sign them. This is a poem called Ode to Your Father. I mentioned Yusef Lateef in this poem, and I think some of you know who that is, but if you don't, he was a great jazz flautist. And you can also find him probably online as well. Ode to Your Father. So Sunday nights, he put on Yusef Lateef, and that flute stole secrets usually locked in the moon's cool house. And you watched his head nod yes to all he couldn't say. Then tiptoed back to TV, hoping he'd forget it was past your time for bed. When he yelled at you, you probably heard his father yelling at him, though you couldn't recognize the flat "don't talk back" settled beneath his voice like a big bass at the bottom of a lake. Growing up, he said "yes, sir" to that brassy baritone. And wasn't his father's voice a part of him too? That part that seemed tied up in some long ago trouble, even when he sat in the shade, baiting a hook. Hard to picture it now, him in his straw hat and high-water dungarees. Oklahoma boy, moping home with a loaf of bread, his buddies teasing and tempting him back to the park. How did he face his first bully, the one that cracked his tooth and cut his arm? Ever wonder where he got that hot grease in the face glare, the look that made you so afraid? His father made him fight that tough kid twice. And at times, didn't the whole country try to break his skin, waiting for him on every corner like a bully? What did he make of all those stores that wouldn't let him in? He worked the slaughterhouse, stiff with dry blood. His overalls could stand by themselves. In spite of this, you found him years later, your pop mopping the kitchen, whistling "My Satin Doll," a tune you hadn't heard, so half listened as if he was some odd station on the radio. And when he'd start the old "Things Were Different Back Then," it sounded like "Once Upon a Time." You shrugged and secretly rolled your eyes, but half of you is still made of him. His long arms, his love of hats, your solitary heart, half jazz, half ready to fight. Your father didn't kiss you like your mother did, but every October he drove you to the Arboretum to see the blood orange leaves, even when he had a lot on his mind. That mind you'll never see inside, though you know it's packed with good songs, some hard feelings, and all the stuff he will not say. I was thinking, I'm not sure why, perhaps it's because my parents are very old, maybe that's why, but I was thinking about the fact that, my mother carried me inside her for 9 months. And I was thinking also about the fact that everybody you see was carried inside somebody for 9 months, right? What interested me is how little we talk about that, or how rarely it seems to be the subject of any discussion. And with that in mind, I just keep wondering how it is that we don't love women just out of hand, like automatically, since our indebtedness is so profound, right? So if you can explain misogyny to me with that in mind, please do after the reading. Anyway, this is it's Ode to Your Mother, and I'm using some of the things she told me about when she was carrying me, and then other things that I'm just letting my mind run with the possibility of such a thing. Ode to Your Mother. Do you remember yourself 6 months after conception, far from the egg, your heart chirping like a hungry chick, those unwalked feet, fat crickets kicking around, eyes blind as buttons, cell by cell, rod by cone, getting ready to call up the colors and lights. And your mother, often craving licorice with apple pie, outside catching a bus with you in her warm pond. A golden koi nosing the surface for bits of bread. You, the unnamed stranger coming for the long stay. Traveling all night, your face taking shape in the shadows. Or maybe she sees herself, a bass drum with something booming inside her. A small theater off Broadway with someone soon to be famous pacing the wings. So much promise. Were you restless to begin? All your vitals rehearsing their hard parts. Did you have any sense that she was out there? Your brain almost building itself. A secret mansion, 1,000,000 doors to 1,000,000 rooms, each with a candle, your little head holding the Milky Way rekindled in miniature. Consciousness, the great mischief, waking up to try again. One particular flicker in the cosmic sea, a starfish riding the big back of a blue whale, which swims like a planet, gliding the sun's slow waves with you, beginning to insist inside this woman you hardly know, though she is everything, steadying her new weight on earth. Your heart, blind as a kite, wind on the rise, 3 months from day. Did you suppose an inkling of what would be out there? The invisible air filling us up, rabbits in hats, hints, houses, banana slugs, bacteria, and trees. Other people. The look on your face, already amazed, or whatever comes just before that. I'll keep it in the family. This is a poem called Notes from Big Bruh, Tom the Bomb, and I will read that for you, Rachel, and for everybody here. I have a big brother, but when I was 12, he was 17, and therefore he was like the wisest person on earth with regard to how to talk to girls. And he also imagined himself extremely smooth. So this is a poem, it's in two voices, and you'll be able to tell when my brother's talking, I think. And I built this out of things he actually said to me. This is not invented. Notes from Big Bruh, Tom the Bomb, Don Juan of Germantown High School, 1967 to 1968. I say, Tom, there's this girl. He says, is she fine like apple wine? She fine enough to be a friend of mine? Her name is Tina. So you want to give Tina your wiener? And Doc's having a party. Is she tuned to your station? She believe in what you faking? And she's gonna be there. Tell her you know the way to San Jose. Tell her you gotta graze in her grass. Tell her you ain't too proud to beg. Yeah, you gots to rock Hudson on her. Give her the movie star moon gazer, the look of love. Say, my duty is your booty. Tell her your Peter is sweeter and you know how to treat her. You gotta sing a little bit, little brother. Gots to hit her with a little bit of Sinatra. Everybody loves my body sometime. Oh, me. Next poem is called Terry Moore. I think Terry's mom and my mom are really good friends, and so they figured our sons should meet. So we were 12 years old, and we were both, it was funny, kind of mysterious actually, we were both kind of football maniacs, you know? And so still to this day, we text back and forth about football. So this is, God, 50 years ago we met. Anyway, so this is a poem called Terry Moore, and I think most of the slang we use in here you will get. I think it might be self-explanatory for the most part. Anyway, there was a slang that I don't think is used anymore, at least I don't hear it anymore. When we were probably in 7th, 8th grade, probably through high school really, the miniskirt had just come into existence. And so if you saw a girl with nice legs, mostly sitting down, I guess you might say it when she's walking by, but not really. It was mostly when you're sitting down, you would say, for example, say, man, check that cheese over there, check that cheese. And we thought we were so hip, you know? But that's what it meant. It meant look at her legs, check her legs out. Otherwise, I think everything else should be pretty self-explanatory. There's another slang in here that is used now, but it didn't mean the same thing to us as it does current in the way it's used now. But I think you'll get it. Terry Moore. Our moms got us together at Woolworths. Remember? Cheeseburgers, summertime, 1967. 12 years in the world. Mostly we burned for football, to get it and move, to shake anybody that wanted to bring us down. 6 points was all we needed, and time to find the future where we'd be badass superstars. We thought it was hard being young with adults running things, and it got harder not to think about girls and which words would bring them close to our hands. Mini skirts. Remember checking the cheese in study hall? Marna Evans. we had no idea where those legs could lead. If it weren't for movies and the legends of our big brothers, we might never have believed in smooth whispers, long kisses, and maybe even now we'd be dreaming only football, the rough touch of leather tightly laced, grabbed and carried to a place where men danced with nothing to explain. The end zone, the promised land. And who could blame us for craving such a simple destination? Then came Joni, and for me, it was Jane. Short hugs, slow songs, their mouths swimming into our mouths. Among the Philly brothers, the word was swag. Did you swag on her? We'd ask, supposing the wet dream of lips. How many times did y'all swag? So new, the French kiss, the perfect neighborhood for anyone as crazy and blue-balled as boys blazing on the verge of their lives. Man, we spent years on the phone daring each other not to be young, not to be afraid of whatever sex might mean. That paperback you found, Nurse Nadine, the way she treated her patients. What exactly was a blowjob? And how long would it be till we knew? Our fathers were scary men, younger than we are now, and ready to make themselves clear without saying anything, especially when we got too cool to listen, too big to hear. Did they believe in sex the way we were starting to? Was there some secret living softly inside their lips, softly inside their fists? My father loved my mother. It looked so simple. Year after year, the kiss goodbye after breakfast, the kiss hello about 5, conversation at dinner, TV until time for bed. It's pretty clear I didn't know much about my parents, just that they were usually nice people and mostly on my side. And this makes me wonder just how blind I'm gonna be, 'cause these days I hardly see anything the way I saw things back then. And bruh, my eyes are wide open. The NFL will never see us. I can't do half the moves we used to do. Loose leg lean, that cutback stutter, short grass lit beneath our simmering feet. But I'm glad these 40 years have found us still friends, that we played some football and watched each other break slowly into men, which is what we are by now, which was always what we thought we really wanted. I'll read you one of the blues villanelles. The villanelles are a form that involves some repetition, repeating lines. And those of you who know the blues knows that the blues also involves repetition, and that the repetitions may have variation that slightly change the meanings. Anyway, so I think they both are kind of family forms, so I combine them. Let me see. This is Eternity Blues Villanelle. This is the newest villanelle. Maybe eternity's not all that long. My blood keeps talking, my tongue tied in a knot. I believe this might go better in a song. By now, you'd think my resolve should be strong. I know the tomorrows bring knock after knock. Maybe eternity's not all that long. I may be naive, but don't get me wrong. I see the good deal is not what I got. Maybe this won't sound bitter in a song. Life ain't no game, but don't you move like a pawn. Still owe that money, your whole life in the hock. Maybe eternity's not that long. I'd sure like to catch you again in that thong. The jazz of your kiss, like a tenor played hot. Yeah, let eternity groove until dawn. Dumb humming the blues, one hand on the bong. Don't know what to do, can't tell what you got. Come on, man, express yourself better in a song. Just turned 62, but that's gotta be wrong. Keep meaning to hit the brakes on my clock. Doesn't eternity seem sorta long? Spend your whole life trying not to be wrong. You see me trying, but my soul's about shot. Wish this could get better in a song, but maybe eternity's not all that long. It's a poem called 8 Ball. My father was not amazing at pool. Sighting along the stick, he would stare down the cue as if some stout albino animal had paused on the green. Then he'd shoot and scatter the others, the lucky ones disappearing. I probably beat him as much as he beat me. All the welts from his parenting quietly driving my shots. Sometimes, when he was feeling it, he'd hit a banker, the 5-ball bending back soft into the side pocket, and the pride on his face shimmered like summer heat rising from asphalt. It was usually early evening, my mother in the kitchen with Walter Cronkite chalking up the news on CBS, as though his solemn delivery could set up some better headlines. At the time, of course, I just wanted to win. Didn't think about what those whoopings meant or why he used that old ironing cord. But I did crave a little revenge, hoped to even the score somehow, especially when my late teens found muscles rallying under my skin. I really thought I could go toe-to-toe with him, get in some good shots, show him what it meant to be overpowered and afraid. I had gotten a lot taller by then and probably might have taken him down. Some days he'd say, "Shut up," and I felt like a young god done wrong by this dumb dad. His thick mustache, his good gray slacks, who said he knew me like the back of his hand. And my veins were racked with adrenaline, ready to help me break the whole damn house. But my pop was often a shy man who wouldn't raise his voice to my mom. He joined the church chess club and stayed out of bars. Sometimes I'd see him alone in the living room, brass blasting from the stereo, a Marlboro cooking in his hand. And though he never said so, I think he would have loved making music, sang loud with a sax, what he could never fit into words. One time, he hit me, and I nearly fell into that glass table by the hi-fi. But he caught me, left me tracing the shock of his knuckles that, for a few days, defined the left side of my face. It couldn't have been easy coming home full of fury, the only black biochemist at a government lab, shaking hands with all the extra shit he had to take. If my son had mouthed off, I like to believe I wouldn't have blacked his eye. I don't have any children, and no hideaway pool table that folds out from the back of a couch. So it's hard to get a clear shot at what might be true with so many rough maybes sitting in the way. Still, I bet my father's life was a lot harder than mine. And I'm pretty sure he believed all he did was mostly exactly what he had to do. Thank you. All right. I'll read this poem. I think. I'll read this poem. It's kind of a long meditation. It's called Walk. It may be, especially in some ways, pertinent now. In some ways, I guess. Walk. Dusk in the body, starlight near the heart. One half-lit street heading into night. Now, the insects magnify their small vocabularies as if talking to you, your shadow sharp, almost alive beneath the lamp. Do we live to scuff each hour, dragging the hours past, as if you could see best by turning back? The present, with her lips soft on your neck. The future, filling with ghosts. I still remember the first dog I ever saw, that crazy tongue, the one sound flashing between its teeth. Days when Cracker Jacks crashed their music in me, and crabgrass sizzled with chiggers, us playing tackle till the sun ran out of breath. Where was it that your heart first opened? Where, when you first began to shutter its rooms? Your mind gradually bending beneath the suspicion that life would not save us, that love itself was little more than a hook for the mouth. Time spent dying quietly, driving to work. Car radio, the yammer, that itchy fuss, each bit a ball-peen hammer chipped against your skull. And the street somehow miles away, the funhouse distance between yourself and everyone else. To be awake means what? Hearing that voice start over in your head. The worries walking in place, the argument backlit. Why do you do this? Thinking, your brain caught in the swarm, words telling you what not to say. I have tried to pass as an almost reasonable man, as if that could mean much these days. Cruelty showing off his sample tray of meats. Have enough people died? Has first dark found your shadow in a vague circle of light? The day walking off, hard news turned rot in your mouth. Is it true the mirror has confused you with someone else? Maybe it is too easy to say darkness and mean trouble or whatever it is, what we can't fight, what the years do to us. That smoldering sense of having been taken prisoner, though you sit there almost a fly, feeding, sunlight like sequins on your faceted eyes. A woman goes by with pants like liquid glass, and I catch myself leaning on memory, the promise of people we don't know. I have been a stranger that first hour in someone's arms, when it seems we will never want again, as if touch held the cure to this chronic condition, the half-knowing being half understood, this blink and smile, the way we go outdoors with the other things held inside our faces. So I'm older now, but maybe the safest thing we can do is insist on what might not be found here. This hopeful walk toward Neverland. I think about fear, its steady governance all over, and what people are willing to believe to keep from being alone. The mind spurred to build its own cage, hatred or the hunger for God, an ache for money, how a mob becomes a country, becomes the history against which we must break our lives. What I've become, this running clock, this heretic, these brushed teeth, this cock covered in cloth, this gang of muscles wearing down, my brain a nest just starting to burn, this that I carry around. Tell me, wherever you are, tell me just how hungry we might be. Forks wet with food filling the opened faces. All day, the daylight, eaten. From his garage, a man and his hammer rattle birds who'd been near sleep. Now, The branches chick and chatter. Now the ants reconsider their silence, and something else comes clear. The veins in the leaves are the same in your hands. Time starts walking into voice. You see yourself on a street, 3 miles before starlight. One late wasp, almost blind, climbs back to its place in the eaves. I'll read you this poem. It's called Donna James. I remember that first time, the empty auditorium, her voice, the dark all around us, her mouth reaching into mine. She was Freddie's foxy older sister, and I didn't know why she wanted to kiss me. She had already finished high school and probably shouldn't have been walking the halls, but she always called me her friend. So one Monday after gym, I found myself beside myself in front of her house with my trench coat and lunch bag, probably not looking much like Shaft. Inside, the air held warm milk, and we talked a bit about her baby and her aunt who paid the rent painting cars. Maybe she liked me because we were both black and mostly alone in the suburbs, but I hadn't thought about that. It was her voice that got me. Banked fire, the color of dusk. Her voice, and my name was smoke in her mouth. I think about it more than I should now. That January noon, an hour before algebra, how most days I'd be thinking football or replaying the 70-some kisses I'd gotten over those lean years. But that day, Donna and me were on the couch munching potato chips. Ruffles have ridges, she kidded, coming from checking the baby who'd slipped into a nap. I was kind of disappointed that we hadn't done anything, but I needed time to get back to school, so I started to stand. She said, "Wait, look at this mess." And with her left hand, she brushed the crumbs from my lap, the way you'd whisk away lint, then swept over my pants again, to be thorough, I guessed, but slower. And then some more, as if her hand were getting drowsy. You know how sometimes you see something but just can't believe it? Like a squirrel bobbling a biscuit on your kitchen counter, or a cricket creeping the red feathers of your mother's Sunday hat. Her hand, there on my lap, could easily have been a 5-fingered flying saucer from the 5th dimension. For a while, I just watched and wondered if she knew where her hand had landed. But it was me who didn't know. Me with my 6 dozen kisses and the great Eden of my virginity. How do we not talk about it every day? The ways we were changed by the gift in someone's touch. Your body, suddenly a bright instrument, played by an otherwise silent divinity. When I heard my zipper, I couldn't have said where my arms were or what a clock was for. I had no idea I could be such a stranger and still be myself. How could I have known what a girl might do to a boy with her mouth if she felt like doing what her mouth could do? It was a kind of miracle, the dreamed impossible. My soul finally called to my flesh. I didn't know what I didn't know, and then I knew. Thank you very much. Thank you. I know it's late. I know some of you may be writers or people who think about poems, and so we could have a couple of questions and then we'll set you free. I know it's Friday night. Don't think I don't know. It's Friday night. Oh man, well that's $1 million question. I mean, you work and you write and you think and you write, and at some point, I think things kind of come together beyond your even understanding it. You know what I mean? It is not unlike. Are you a musician by any chance? No. Okay. Anybody in here play an instrument? Okay, you guys are in here. You know how early on you just sounded like any old something because you were just figuring it out? And then bit by bit, all of a sudden, you started to have a certain quality in the sound that you could make. The principle is the same. It's practice, and then the language becomes, in various ways, part of your own being. In the same way that a musician, like his or her instrument might become part of them, and then it starts to reflect them in some odd but intimate way. Think Hendrix, think Coltrane, think any number of other, some of you know who Al Di Meola is, some of you know who Django Reinhardt is. I mean, there are millions of people like this who suddenly the instrument is something slightly different in their hands because they've lived with it so closely. I think the same is true of language. I think this is true of probably any poet, probably several poets in here. You know, if you sit with words long enough, they become part of the garment that you wear, you know what I mean? And so you wear it a certain way, and that may be what comes to the tone, man. I mean, that's my best guess. But good question, yes. Well, that's not, I mean, again, I'm not conscious of it. When I was a child, I was talking about this earlier, my mother used to read to my brother and I, and she was a really good reader. I don't really read like her, I guess, but I always loved the way her voice sounded, so it probably has some bearing on how I think about voice when I'm reading, but I don't know, truthfully. Anyway, the most important thing you can do if you want to be a writer of any kind, poet, fiction writer, nonfiction, playwright, whatever, is to read as much as you can. Because what you're really trying to do is become as familiar with what language can do as possible. And bit by bit, what you find in other people's work becomes part of the way you think about words. And then beyond your own consciousness, you will be doing some of the things that you admire in other people's work because you have integrated into your being exactly like if you're learning an instrument. and you really, really love the way Santana plays, or you really, really love, who are the badass guitarists now? Because I'm thinking of the old days, but there must be some.
I think William Malmsteen, he's like a Swedish heavy metal.
Okay, a medalist. What did you say? Oh yeah, Kravitz. He's nice. Yes, indeed. Anyway, but you know, any instrumentalist, I mean, they listen to lots of people, and what you hear when you hear them play is this amalgamation of all the things they love in music channeled through their own sensibility. That's absolutely true. I have a number of friends who are good musicians, and but I think writing is the same thing. That bit by bit, if you really sit with words, sit with them, read, reread, listen, reread, bit by bit, language becomes really part of the fabric of your being. And when you write, you'll treat it differently. The words belong to you. You know what I mean? As opposed to like, this is something I learned in class. It becomes, the language becomes a part of your blood and bone. That's what I like to think about it. And that's when what you write takes on a particular character about, you know, about what you sense and see in the world. Well, you know, it's funny. It's interesting that you'd ask that. I always liked to write, even as a little kid, even when I was all about being a pro football player, because there was a while, I was talking about this earlier too, when, man, you couldn't have told me nothing. If you said, no, I don't think you're going to be a pro ball player, you're probably going to end up right, I would have said, I shall play some football, my friend. That's what I would have said. But it didn't work out that way. I was probably not fast enough, or, I mean, I was pretty big, but there were cats big as I was and faster. And so it worked out that I didn't end up playing beyond my freshman year as a college player. And I think the latent love that I had for language and for poetry came to the fore when I stopped playing football. It became my other focal point for what I love, my passion, right? So that is probably how I stumbled into the world of writing. I mean, I certainly wasn't deliberate. I hadn't planned to do it. It just worked that way. And as I said, I always liked to write. And so I took a workshop, and then all of a sudden, so you can do this with words. And then I became consumed by poems. But with regard to vulnerability, I think there are a couple things. And some of you may be aspiring writers, and you may find yourselves like nervous, or what will people think of me? But what I realized, even before I knew it consciously, was that everybody, to one extent or other, is naked. You know what I mean? It's like we all have crazy stories and crazy memories. It's not like I'm the only kid who ever thought about sex. Everybody tried to figure out what sex meant, right? So I don't feel vulnerable about that. And I think, I don't know, I never really thought hard about it. I just figured that poetry was a vehicle whereby I could talk about what it felt like to be a human being. I mean, I'm a specific kind of human being, a black kid from Philadelphia with particular parents and particular circumstances, but I assume that my experiences as a person overlap with almost anybody's to one degree or another. So I never felt like I was revealing something about my life that didn't connect naturally to other lives. So that's something I never did worry about. Maybe I should have, right? But no, I never did. I always thought, this is part of life, right? Everyone's life is full of craziness and fun and bitterness and sorrow. And, maybe all of us have, to one extent or other, memories that are painful and memories that are delightful. And, so I figured, so as an artist of any kind, I think, but for me as a poet, I feel like maybe if I write well enough, it becomes clear that every human story is connected to all human stories, because the writers that inspired me taught me that, right? Whether they were Russian, Nigerian, Chinese, you could see that their story is connected in some way to your story. And so this is the idea, I think, in writing and art in general, but for my purposes, writing, to remind people over and over and over until we finally get it, right? That this is our story. This whole thing is our story. And we can divide ourselves up if we want in terms of gender and sexual preference and race and class. We can play all those games if we want, but it's all bullshit. The truth is, it's one story, and it connects us all. And to me, that's what makes art, and literature in particular, but art in general, really powerful, because the lesson is repeated every day, if you're paying attention, that there is one story, and it is all of us, and we play whatever games you want. But the truth is that our blood is really one complicated river, one. That's what I really think that art reminds me of. So, I mean, I will not go on like a madman, but I could. Well, it's complicated. I mean, I think if you're lucky enough to have parents who fed you and kept you clothed, you're crazy if you're not grateful. Now, I don't know if anyone had perfect parents. Maybe some did. I did not. My parents, I thought, were very, very good parents, But you realize that, yeah, there were some things maybe could have been done differently, surely, But I thought, all in all, one of the things, the reason I'm writing, wrote this most recent book is that my parents are very old and not well, and they will probably not be with us in this dimension anyway for a whole lot longer. And so I was thinking a lot about them in the last 5 or 6 years. And so I don't know, it was important to me to just come to grips with the fact that, of course, I am these two people. To some extent, I am also something distinct from them, But to really see myself in a way that is whole, I think I had to see them more as whole, which is where you might hear the empathy coming from. That, yeah, I mean, I have differences with my parents. I certainly did, and probably still do to some extent. But, my life is completely dependent upon their generosity, completely, if I'm honest. So what I wanted to do when I was writing about them is present, certainly my father could be a very rough man, lovely man in some ways, but he would kick your behind. My mother, of course, tough in her own way. But I figured I wanted to make the book a tribute to them, and also it gave me a chance in writing it to think very hard about who they were, and on the continuum, who I am because of them. And so, yeah, there are many things I feel, mostly, as you say, empathy, compassion, forgiveness. And truthfully, that may be too strong a word. I don't hold too much resentment against my parents. They've treated me very well. I am standing before you in large part because they treated me well, But yeah, it's complicated. All, I think, deep and long emotional relationships are kind of complicated with a number of dimensions and levels. When I was first writing, even in my first book, I was writing about memories, things I remembered as being a kid. I remembered watching girls jump double dutch in my neighborhood. There was a poem I wrote called Double Dutch, and I wrote a poem about football, playing with my boys, on the street corners, in the middle of the street, playing touch. I wrote about that. So memory has always been with me, and it's just gotten more complex as I've gotten older. And also sexuality and sensuality always interested me, and I've tried to become better and better and better at articulating the beauty, the mystery of the erotic world. Those things I see roots in. I didn't really write much about my parents at all. I mean, not till probably this last book. I didn't talk about them much at all, really. I think, in a way, you spend a lot of your adult life trying to distinguish yourself from who your parents were. But I think ultimately, if we're lucky, we get to come full circle and say, yes, but I am them to some extent, and that the quality of my voice, for example, physically, it's my mom and my dad's voice. People say, boy, you have this really interesting voice. And I listen to my parents, I think, I think it's their voice combined. I think that's what it is. So yeah, and then your second part was my favorite poet? Goodness gracious, that's a very complicated question. I love many poets. When I quoted Lucille Clifton, I love Lucille Clifton,
Who inspired you as you were growing?
Oh, who are okay, I'll just give you a list, because if I try and give you one, it's pointless. Okay, certainly the poets of the Harlem Renaissance. My mother was very serious about the Harlem Renaissance when I was a kid. She taught English, high school and junior high school English. And every time I had to do any kind of research paper, she'd say, you know, you could do it on the Harlem Renaissance. And so I did paper after paper. Langston Hughes, Helene Johnson, Claude McKay, Zora Neale Hurston, you know, you name it, you're going to list. I was reading them, not maybe fully understanding them, but I was very involved in it. And so I didn't know it, but of course they were influencing the way I think about poetry. And then, you know, as a teenager in the 60s, I'm hearing Gil Scott-Heron, you know, the last poets, you know, Nikki Giovanni, who of course is not that far from here at Virginia Tech, you know, she was, some of you probably know this. I know my black folks who are in my age range know Nikki Giovanni was all business in the 60s, buddy. You talk about a revolutionary voice, Nikki Giovanni take the hair off the top of your head with some of those poems. Check her out. You can research her. If you don't know, you better ask somebody. Anyway, so Nikki Giovanni certainly, and then I started discovering poets, contemporary poets of all colors. I mean, I love Pablo Neruda, you know, from Chile, Octavio Paz from Mexico, Garcia Lorca from Spain, my man Vallejo from Peru. The Spanish poets were killing me. Anyway, and then of course Sexton and Denise Levertov, Richard Hugo. And who else? Ralph Dickey, who was an African-American poet, committed suicide young, but he was really brilliant. James Dickey, white cat from Georgia. Some of you know the movie Deliverance. He was a great poet, greater poet, I think, than a novelist, but I used to read him really heavily. And all these people I was learning things from Mark Strand, the late Mark Strand, who just passed away not too long ago. I was reading them, learning about images, how to use imagery, how do you turn a line, how do you break a line, what does it mean, how to use a stanza. So I was pulling all that information from them. Those are some of them. There are others still. I mean, I still admire Cornelius Eady very much, though we are contemporaries really, but I still think I learned a lot from him. And then crazy people like Russell Edson, who was like as wild a poet as I've ever run into. You know, so you're reading people and you're getting two things. You're learning something about the craft of writing, but you're also learning about permission. Like, if I feel kind of crazy, can I write something crazy? And then you read Russell Edson and say, yes, you can. You know, if I want to get into something really sexual, can I do that? And then you read Sharon Olds' The Gold Cell and you're like, whoa, yes, I can. You know, and so there are all those people, if I want to get into something funky, can I do that? And then you listen to Parliament Funkadelic and say, yes, I can. You know what I mean? You listen and you read to get permission. Margaret Walker, too, the Molly Means, that funky ballad she wrote in the 1930s. Funky as anything in hip hop. Y'all got to check her out. She's gone now, but I'm sure you can find her reading Molly Means. It has all the groove that you hear in hip hop, I think. So yeah, I read a lot of people, and you just realize that it's all right to do the thing that you think you need to do. That's really what I draw from the influence. Yeah. I think I probably want to leave what any artist would say. You want people, if I were to fall off a cliff tonight, and I hope not to, you would want people to say, yeah, you know, if you read Seibles, man, you know, God, you got to read him, because if you do, you'll see this and this and this. You know, just you want to leave some kind of energy, some kind of charge that can propel another writer, a younger writer, or even a peer. I mean, I think about what I've taken from people like Pablo Neruda or Langston Hughes, for that matter. And then fiction writers, too. I take a lot from them, too. Toni Morrison is a total beast. My man, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, 100 Years of Solitude. Come on, man. Pow, right? You just want someone to say, have you read Fast Animal? Pow. That's what you want. That's what I want to leave. You know, someone to say, Dad, you got to read that, you know? That's all you can ask for. Beyond that, you know, you just want you want the world to continue to be a place where art and poetry, you know, have a place to live. That's what you really want. Beyond my own work, you want the world to remain the human world to remain sensitive and intelligent enough that people will always spend time sitting with poems, thinking about art, thinking about what it means to be human, what does it mean to be conscious. That's what you really want. So if I can be a part of propelling that idea forward, that's plenty.
And you just did. Thank you very much.